United Nations General Assembly. This is Ramaphosa's first visit to the UN as head of state and government, where he will outline the country's domestic and foreign policy objectives, including the land reform program, as well as economic challenges.
He arrived on a commercial South African Airways flight after the 16-hour journey from Johannesburg and will spend the day being briefed by his aides ahead of a grueling schedule over the next 3 days.
Welcome to New York, Mr. President. Good to see you, sir.
His first major agenda item will be the Mandela Peace Summit and the unveiling of a Madiba statue that will be gifted to the UN. He will speak at the Council on Foreign Relations in conversation with former US Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. He will attend a dinner for heads of state and government hosted by US President Donald Trump. The President will address the General Assembly on Wednesday and engage business leaders at the Bloomberg Global Business Forum. He will also speak at a high-level meeting on eradicating tuberculosis on Wednesday.
TB is a socio-economic disease of the poor, but I must state now is a world concern. That's why it's coming to United Nations. You are right, Sherwin, it was ignored because it was regarded as a disease of the developing world. I must tell you, now most countries, even Europe, are starting to realize that TB is a problem. I mean, it's killing 1.5 million people per annum. And without really comparing diseases, you are aware what happened during the Ebola epidemic in West Africa. Some 4 years ago, the whole world was moving in a whirlwind. At the end of it, 11,000 people had died globally because of Ebola, but 1.5 million of TB. But that did not even make any blip on the radar screen. The world just ignored it.
While financing for the Sustainable Development Goals will also be at the top of this week's agenda.
I often speak about a surge in diplomacy. Our world also needs a surge in investment in the Sustainable Development Goals. It is important that all developed countries meet the commitments they made in the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. The United Nations, for its part, will continue to support developing countries in creating conditions for mobilizing domestic resources, including through tax reform and other good governance measures. Simultaneously, I appeal to the international community to take much more effective steps to fight illicit flows of capital, money laundering and tax evasion, which continue to siphon away much-needed funds for development from the developing world.
It's all systems go for the annual World Cup of high-stakes diplomacy at the United Nations. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
Joining us live from New York now is SABC correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Thanks so much for your time, Sherwin. There's a lot of firsts that are going to be taking place at this UN General Assembly. Talk us through some of those.
Well, we start with the fact that it is President Ramaphosa's first visit here as head of state and government. It is a first for his chief diplomat, Lindiwe Sisulu, the international relations minister. It's also the first time that a peace summit in the name of former President Nelson Mandela will be undertaken here at the United Nations, as the South African delegation really tries to inspire intergovernmental networks here at the United Nations to really place the integrity, the legacy, the example of former President Nelson Mandela at the center of their deliberations. It's a message they hope to take into the Security Council when they join the Security Council officially on the 1st of January 2019. And it's a legacy that they hope will infuse the negotiations, deliberations, bilateral meetings that they will engage with here at the United Nations over the next 3 days. The President is supported by no less than 6 cabinet ministers: defense, health, trade and industry, finance, arts and culture, and I'm missing one, but certainly a strong contingent here from South Africa, given the fact that there are so many things that happen at the United Nations during this week. The President also later in the week will engage in the Bloomberg Global Forum And let's not for one second think that geopolitical concerns are the only thing on his agenda. Of course, the teetering South African economy, as we all know, basically in a technical recession. The president announcing that stimulus package just before departing for New York. So that will form part of his deliberations here, certainly as he engages business leaders at the Bloomberg Global Forum. Incidentally, will be part of a panel discussion at that forum with the Prime Minister of Norway, the President of Colombia, and moderated by no less than the former President of the United States, Bill Clinton. So very, very interesting times ahead.
Sherwin, we also know that Egypt's president is going to this UN General Assembly saying he wants to pledge to Arab regional security. Do we know what other big important issues other countries and South Africa are going to try and bring up during the UNGA?
That's a great question. I think what a lot of people are looking forward to is President Donald Trump of the United States presiding over a UN Security Council meeting on non-proliferation. There will be a second Security Council meeting that will be chaired by his Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, that will look at the issue of North Korea. We have seen this era of détente, if you want to call it that, or rapprochement between the United States and the leadership of North Korea. So that will be a focal point. Of course, a number of bilaterals that will be of interest to the South Africans. He will have a bilateral with the Ethiopian Prime Minister. Of course, wonderful news coming out of the Horn of Africa in terms of the peace, the peace that has been established between Eritrea and Ethiopia. He will also meet with the new president of Cuba. Of course, we are coming to the end of the Castro era in Cuba, so he will meet with President Canal Diaz of Cuba. And then, of course, the president also speaking, as we mentioned in that package, at the high-level meeting on tuberculosis. This has been something that the Health Minister, Aaron Motsoaledi, has been spearheading. The South African mission has taken a lead in terms of negotiating the political declaration that will be adopted there. And the president due to speak at that event on Wednesday. But let's also not forget and overshadow the fact that Monday is very much a day for South Africa. There'll be an unveiling of a Nelson Mandela statue that will be gifted to the United Nations by President Ramaphosa, and then heads of state will gather in the General Assembly Hall to speak at the Nelson Mandela Peace Summit. And among the speakers in that opening session will be the widow of Nelson Mandela, Graça Machel. Among the other speakers will be the newly installed Executive Director of Amnesty International, South Africa's own Kumi Naidoo. So very much a South African focus here, and certainly keeping delegates and their aides on their toes.
Sherwin Bryce-Pease coming to us live from New York. Still much to talk about on the UN General Assembly, and we'll try and get Sherwin back and to give us more updates as things continue to happen there. That was our correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease coming to us live from New York. You can view any of our interviews and features by going to sabcnews.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter, and you can use the hashtag #4View to make any comment on the show tonight.
The SABC Foreign Desk will bring you comprehensive coverage of UNGA 73. SABC News, impartial and independent.
Coming up at 8:30 on SABC News, we will be having a one-on-one with President Cyril Ramaphosa. For now, let's carry on with our news of the day. The family of the late Environmental Affairs Minister Edna Molewa says she succumbed to complications of Legionnaire's disease, a severe form of pneumonia. Inhaling the Legionella bacteria causes lung inflammation. Molewa's brother, Fana Meti, says the family appreciates the outpouring of support they have received since her passing yesterday. Molewa died in a Pretoria hospital where she had been receiving treatment for the past 2 weeks. She was 61 years old. President Cyril Ramaphosa last night announced that Molewa will have an official funeral. Molewa's brother,